everyone, welcome to Ashley Talks Movies. I'm back with another video, but this time I'm not going to be talking about a movie. I'm actually going to be talking about a new TV series. Well, it's actually a docuseries, and it's not really that new. I'm talking about the Imagineering Story, which is a docuseries on Disney+. It's a 6-episode series, and the 6th episode literally dropped on Friday, so I've watched the entire series now, and so I'm going to share my thoughts about it. Now, I have to say, I was really excited about the Imagineering Story for a number of reasons. One, I'm a Disney fan, a huge Disney fan. Two, I used to work for Disney. Maybe I'll do a video on that. And I was interested in seeing sort of behind the scenes stuff that even as a former cast member at Disney World that I never got to see. Two, I love learning about new things, and I was really intrigued to see some of the behind the scenes stuff in terms of how attractions are made, how lands are developed, the concepts behind those, seeing something from concept to reality. Yeah, and just getting a behind the scenes look at Disney theme parks, which, are huge. So yeah, I was really interested in seeing this TV series, and I have to say, for the most part, I was pleasantly surprised by it and really enjoyed it. I mean, there were a couple things that that I think would have made the series a lot better, but overall it was really good. It was really good series and a fascinating look at Imagineering, which is this group within the Disney company, team of people who are really creative, and they're the designers and the artists and the architects and engineers who come up with the ideas for the attractions, for the lands, for the theme parks, and they're just this group that I think for a lot of people who don't closely follow Disney, like me or some other people, for the most part, they're this kind of elusive group, and I think this series allows them to kind of get the spotlight and for people to kind of realize how much work goes into creating an attraction, or how much work goes into designing a land, or a show, or anything that you see in a Disney theme park. So anyway, let's just get straight to the review of the entire series as a whole, because there's some things I want to break down about it. As I mentioned before, I was really excited to watch the series, and I wanted to wait to do a video about it until I'd watched the entire series versus just doing individual episodes and sort of breaking those down, because I think a lot of this works better if we look at it as a cohesive piece, like every part put together versus each individual episode. So watch the final episode. Honestly, I wish there were more episodes, because I think that's just how fascinating and engaging the series was. So the series starts off with Disneyland. Makes sense. That's what kind of kicked it all off. So it starts off with the creation of Disneyland and the first episode, and sort of the idea behind that, and what Walt was doing to try to get it built and all that stuff. And then the second episode then delves into the expansion of that idea, the expansion of like this idea of Disneyland and moving it, having another park, particularly Disney World in Florida, and also Epcot, which was one of Walt's like final projects, to Tokyo Disneyland, which I found very fascinating, and I wish, which I'll get into later, wish they would have expanded more on that. So it's almost like a chronological series, in that it starts from the beginning and kind of works its way up to the present. And throughout the series, throughout each episode, it sort of highlights a certain attraction, or highlights a certain land, or highlights a certain project that was important at the time. Again, going from sort of the beginning to the present. So I was really surprised and pleasantly surprised by how much behind the scenes footage that they used. They had a lot of archival footage. They had, like almost like home movie type footage from Imagineers who would, take their cameras around and kind of, interview each other. They had footage of, attractions being built and tested. And so, yeah, it just gives you a different perspective on the projects and the attractions, because, for the most part, you see sort of the polished video that's sent out for promotional purposes. And here you kind of see things that are a little rough around the edges, and the video's kind of grainy, or it's it's not the attraction that you're looking at is not fully realized, and it's just kind of moving. So I really like that. Another thing I really liked was that they had Imagineers, past and present, featured in the series, talking about various projects that they worked on when they got to those moments in the episode. So I really liked them kind of having them featured, and they can share their insights and sort of a different perspective on what they did and what they contributed to various projects. I really liked, so not a major thing, but Angela Bassett serves as narrator of the series, and I love Angela Bassett. I think she's a fantastic actress, and it works so well for what they're doing with this series, because her voice is very soothing, and so this series is very sentimental. It's very nostalgic. If you're a huge Disney fan, it's gonna pull on your your heartstrings and your emotions, and it's made to do that. So having Angela Bassett narrate just totally works with this. What else really worked for me, and I was really surprised by this because I wasn't expecting it, was that there were a few times where within this documentary that members of the Disney company, past or present, that were featured in the series were pretty forthcoming with some aspects that didn't work. There were a couple of times throughout the series where they would say, like, we messed up, this didn't work, this could have been better. Not enough to my liking. I mean, it's a documentary series made by Disney for Disney, commissioned by Disney for Disney. So it's not gonna really get too deep into some of its criticisms, which I'll touch on a little later in this review. But I was surprised that they were moments of them of being pretty candid or forthcoming, because I wasn't expecting it. I was expecting it to be very much a look at Disney, it's great, it's awesome, we have Imagineers, they create all these great attractions, all the attractions are fantastic, all our parks are great, every project that we've ever worked on is fantastic, look at it, isn't it magical? And I mean, they did that. There was a lot of that. But there was also a lot of, we learned from these mistakes, or we tried this and it didn't work, or here's some projects that we had an idea for and we couldn't quite get it from concept to reality. And so yeah, I was pleasantly surprised by that. Now, to the things that didn't work for me within this series, and I think, as I mentioned before, it could have, I think, elevated the series a lot more had there been more of this. This series is very much a Disney piece, in that it's made to it's created to make Disney look great, understandable, but it lacks a lot of the forthcoming candidness that I would have hoped that they would have done with this, because this was a great chance for Disney sort of like to say and address some of its criticisms within the parks. I mean, this series isn't focusing on the company as a whole, right? It's literally focusing just on the theme parks and the Imagineers and what they contributed to some of that. So there are a lot of criticisms within the Disney company that aren't relevant here. But when you're talking about the theme parks and what worked and what didn't work, a good example is, so they mention there's one episode, I don't know if it's 3 or 4, where they start talking about expansion within Disney World, Florida, and they briefly mention sort of the construction of Disney MGM Studios, which is now called Disney's Hollywood Studios. And I was really hoping they would delve a little bit more into that one, because one, Disney Hollywood Studios is one of my favorite parks. Two, that's the park I worked at when I worked at Disney. And it's a very fascinating park. But the problem I had with it is that, you know, they kind of mentioned, oh yeah, we decided to, you know, build this park, and, you know, we're going to focus on old school Hollywood and classic Hollywood and things, but they don't delve into why they decided to build Disney's Hollywood Studios, which was a direct response to competition from, you know, Universal, which is still around today. And I thought that would have been an interesting dynamic to add in there, as, you know, like, okay, Disney's facing this competition and they're responding to it by building this park, but that was just sort of glossed over and not really addressed. I would have loved if they had focused more on individual Imagineers. You know, there's some really fascinating Imagineers that they touch on, they mention, but some of them it's just sort of brief, so you don't get a really good sense of their creative contribution. They'll say like, oh, this, you know, Imagineer was, you know, really prolific with, you know, paint and color, and they had this. Okay, that's great, but, you know, especially if they've been an Imagineer for decades, it'd been nice to kind of really focus in on them and see their particular contribution. And they did it for a couple of people. You know, you have Kim Irvine. She's very much, you know, prominently featured in this docuseries. Joe Rohde's featured in it too, and most people, I think, would know who Joe Rohde is, especially if they follow Disney projects and things like that. But yeah, you know, just some of the older Imagineers that had some contributions in the early years. It's been nice to kind of really focus a little bit more on them. I really think they should do a follow-up series, you know, like a companion series, and maybe focus on individual attractions, because I think that would be really fun to watch, sort of see how, you know, different, you know, they could spotlight different ones. It doesn't be every attraction that Disney's ever done, but some of the bigger ones, just sort of focus on them, highlight them, talk about them from concept to, you know, finished product. That would be pretty interesting. Overall, I enjoyed the series. You know, some of the things that I'm mentioning that, you know, I would have loved to see doesn't really take away from the series. It's a really good series, and it does what it's supposed to do, which is to highlight the Imagineers, you know, the people who created the attractions and the lands, give them a spotlight, because I mean, they deserve it. They, you know, they're very creative people, and they were faced with a lot of things, and they mentioned this in the series, like budget cuts and you know, executives sort of, you know, pushing back. So, you know, I appreciate that, and that's a really fascinating look into that world. The series is very sentimental, as I mentioned before, and that's fine. That works. Again, it's supposed to be an emotional. You're supposed to have an emotional response to this, right? Because it's like everyone has this, you know, for the most part, everyone has this like idea of Disney, or if you've ever been to a Disney theme park, you have a personal connection to it. And so this series is designed to sort of say, okay, you know, that ride that you really enjoyed, here's how that came about, or that land that you visited, or the park that you visited and you had a great time, that memory, here's how that was created. This is what we did to create that for you and for everybody else. And so I think that works, and that's very effective. Again, I wish there had been a little bit more you know, critiques. You know, it'd been a great chance for Disney to kind of, you know, critique themselves a little bit more. Solid series. I highly recommend it. I think, if anything, this series is a great example of what Disney can do with Disney Plus. You know, they have this new streaming service. They're going to be putting more original content on it. And, you know, they have something like The Mandalorian, which is great. Star Wars fans are enjoying it, and it's doing really well. But I think the Imagineering Story is a better example of really where Disney can kind of push themselves in terms of the original content that they offer on their platform. And also, I would love to see more of that. It doesn't have to necessarily be a series about Disney or behind the scenes look at Disney, but it should be engaging and interesting, like the Imagineering Story. So anyway, let me know what you think in the comment section below. Have you watched the Imagineering Story? What did you like? What did you not like? What did you think should have there been more of or less of? So share your thoughts in the comment section below. Please like and share this review, and don't forget to subscribe.